Welcome to this presentation hosted by the Office of Student and School Success. My name is Sue Cohn, and I serve as Policy and Research Coach in the office.
Hi, I'm Jim Paxino, Success Coach for the Office of Student and School Success.
Our office recorded 2 presentations to support schools and districts in using the data analysis protocol to inform the action planning process. The first recording is titled Data into Action, Part 1. That presentation described in detail the 5 steps of the data analysis protocol that leadership teams and staff can use to inform action planning and decision making. This second recording focuses on clarifying and refining problems of practice identified in steps 3 and 4 of the data analysis protocol and determining next steps to address those problems of practice. We will use a case study format and actual school data to demonstrate a coaching session between a principal and coach around these steps of the protocol. We invite you to pause this presentation at any time to allow you and your team to reflect on the information presented and how you might proceed with your data analysis process.
As indicated on this slide, we strongly recommend participants view several modules available on our website prior to viewing this presentation. These include Triangulating Data to Surface Equities and Inequities in Student Outcomes, and Data into Action Part 1. We also suggest participants utilize a variety of data when engaging in steps 1, 2, and 3 of the data analysis protocol. The areas of congruence and discrepancy identified through the protocol will inform your work around steps 4 and 5. This presentation addresses a challenge shared by coaches and school and district leaders and their staffs. How do we effectively utilize the abundance of data available to us, from achievement and demographic data to perceptual and other data, to surface equities and inequities in our student outcomes, as well as to understand the educator and systems practices impacting those outcomes? This presentation uses a case study approach with actual data to illustrate how one school used the data analysis protocol to address this challenge. We will model a coaching session between a veteran principal and leadership coach. The principal is skilled in analyzing data and, together with the leadership team, engage the staff in analyzing data and crafting narratives. Step 2 in the data analysis protocol. This coaching session focuses on preparing the principal to continue to steps 3 and 4 of the protocol with the leadership team and staff. As noted on the slide, at the end of this presentation, we hope participants will understand how to triangulate school-specific data to identify and prioritize areas of agreement, congruence, and disagreement, discrepancy in your data, particularly as they apply to your school's goals and recent initiatives. Use your findings to clarify and review problems of practice to address inequities in student outcomes, again, particularly as they apply to your school's goals and initiatives. And articulate next steps with your team for using the protocol in crafting and revising your school's SMART goals.
We begin with information about our school. This helps set the context for the coaching conversation around our use of the data analysis protocol. Approximately 550 students are enrolled in grades K through 5 in our elementary school. About 85% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. About 45% are English learners, and about 13% receive special education services. This is our 3rd year as a priority school. We were identified because of low performance on the state assessments in reading and math over the last 3 years.
This slide outlines the 5 steps in the data analysis protocol. The companion to this presentation, Data into Practice Part 1, provided specific details for each step. As indicated earlier, we strongly recommend leadership teams and staffs view Part 1 prior to viewing Part 2. This presentation focuses on steps 3 and 4 of the protocol. We begin with a quick review of how our leadership team first determined readiness to benefit on the part of our staff to engage in this protocol. We then briefly describe the process to move through the first 2 steps.
Before moving forward, our leadership team considered 3 areas described in our EES staff report: problem solving, conflict resolution, and sense of urgency. The graph for each is shown on this slide. All 3 directly relate to trust and the readiness of our staff to benefit from the action planning process. The high levels of positive response, indicated by dark and light green areas on each graph, indicated we have high levels of readiness to benefit from engaging our leadership team and our staff in the process. After reviewing our goals, initiatives, and priorities, we decided to focus on the data listed on this slide. Our team is very interested in comparing our data to district-level data, so those data were included as well. Our school staff and leadership team have a multitude of data available, so our coach assisted us in selecting those data that most closely align with our goals and initiatives. Because data come from multiple sources, he helped our team to organize our reports in a format that supported participants to understand and make observations about the data. The next several slides provide examples of data we used with our school. These sources may be appropriate for your school as well. Our team used ORS as the source for SBA data because it provided access to results from the most current test administration as well as for previous years. And please note that data from ORS are considered preliminary until they are deemed official by OSPI. As a school in improvement status, we were especially interested in the performance of our English learners and our students with disabilities over the last 3 years. ORS allowed us to compare English learners to non-English learners, which provided the opportunity to examine gaps in performance. Strengthening our school's instructional program is at the core of our improvement efforts. Therefore, we were particularly interested in survey results related to Principle 4, Strengthen the School's Instructional Program. The table on this slide illustrates the results for our staff perspectives around this principle. And as can be seen on this slide, we also looked at student perspectives, again around the same principle. We wanted to understand both student and staff perspectives around progress with strengthening our instructional program. Because we have 3 years of DIBELS data to compare with 3 years of SBA data, our team thought it would be important to analyze areas of congruence and discrepancy in student performance between the two assessments. Additionally, because DIBELS is administered at all grades in our school, this was an opportunity to involve all K-5 teachers in this process. We used our district student management system for attendance data to create the table shown on this slide. The district student management system allows us to customize our reports and target the type of attendance data we're interested in reviewing. For 2016-17, our attendance goal was to decrease the number of students with 18 or more absences, either excused or unexcused, during the school year by 20%. We used 18 absences for goal setting since that equates to 10% of the school year, and that's how OSPI defines chronic absenteeism. We created the table shown on this slide to consolidate our data for ease of analysis and to facilitate our analysis process. Our team found it easiest to look at these multiple sources of data in a single view. Our leadership coach developed this table for us. As you can see, it includes SBA, DIBELS, and attendance data for 2015, 2016, and 2017. This enabled team members to compare data across multiple years. With the exception of perceptual data, which are best analyzed in the original format, all data from all sources were combined into a single table. In talking with other coaches and principals, it seemed that this is an important, though often overlooked, data practice.
You're absolutely right, Sue. I can't overemphasize how important it is to organize data into a comprehensible, multi-year format. This allows the team to analyze relevant data and determine how to move those data in action, the focus of this presentation.
We use this data observation sheet described in the Data into Practice Part 1 presentation for our data carousel. A small sample of the many narrative statements that emerged are listed on this slide. The columns titled Congruent Data Information and Discrepant Data Information are reserved for the next step in the process.
Sue, your team did a great job with the narratives, particularly because they are written as statements of fact or objective observations about the data.
After completing steps 1 and 2, leadership team members agreed we were ready to proceed with step 3. I turned to our leadership coach for support in determining how to proceed. Jim, what are your suggestions as to what we do next?
Thanks, Sue, for the review of the first steps in the process. It's good to have the data and the data observation sheets ready for these next steps in the protocol. When moving forward with your leadership team, I suggest you begin by reviewing the concepts of congruence and discrepancy to ensure all team members have a common understanding of these terms. Your team is then ready to review the data observation sheets from step 2 and identify areas of congruence, that is, where there is agreement among the various sources of data, particularly as they relate to school goals and recent initiatives. At the same time, the team can also identify areas of discrepancy or disagreement among the various sources of data, again focusing on those that relate directly to school goals and initiatives. During this process, the team will also be able to identify areas for celebration and challenges related to the school's problem of practice. So let's talk a bit more about areas of congruence and discrepancy, particularly as they relate to our goals and initiatives. Areas of congruence will assist the school in identifying those practices that should be sustained over time. We will be sure to create or revise our SMART goals and tasks to enable us to move those practices to full implementation and sustainability. Areas of discrepancy will assist us in identifying practices to disrupt, dismantle, and replace with evidence-based practices.
Thank you for those explanations, Jim. I'm wondering what you think about the areas I listed on the slide around congruency and discrepancy. I developed these based on our data and school goals and initiatives, and would like to use these examples with the leadership team. What do you think?
They look good to me, Sue. Let's use these examples to show how the team might complete the final 2 columns in the data observation sheet. You could show this completed data observation sheet to the leadership team as an example of how the finished product might look. Again, as noted earlier, the areas of congruent data or information may assist the team in identifying celebrations to share with the school community. Similarly, findings around areas of discrepant data and information may surface challenges and problems of practice that the team will want to explore more deeply. I'd like to reinforce something you said earlier. That is, that it's important to focus on school goals and initiatives when completing this step in the protocol.
Jim, thank you for sharing this example. I think it will make sense to the leadership team. I don't want to sway their thinking around areas of congruence and discrepancy. Still, I believe they will appreciate having an example.
The next step is to clarify or refine our problem of practice. That is, to develop statements that theorize about the root cause of performance deficits. Typically, they begin with the description of the data around the issue and explicitly include all 3 components of the instructional core: what the teacher is doing, what the students are doing, and the content.
You know, Jim, this is a great review for me. I think we learned from the presentation for Data into Action Part 1 that our statement of the problem of practice should describe an issue, something that is happening that is problematic. And I recall you emphasizing it should be an issue that we care deeply about and that we know would make a significant difference for student learning if we improved it. You also underscored that addressing problems of practice would promote and require deep learning for both our students and our staff, and probably require additional support and professional learning for our staff to fully address. So, for example, for this year, we focused on implementing Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions as our problem of practice. We identified that because we thought it would directly address low performance of our students on state assessments over the last several years.
This step will engage your team in a deeper dive into the data and support you to clarify or refine problems of educator practice or systems that are impacting student outcomes. As described on the slide, you'll use the narratives from Step 2 and the areas of congruence and discrepancy that surfaced in Step 3 to create a master data observation sheet. This will support you as you clarify and refine problems of practice for your school. The master data observation sheet uses the same observation template, but eliminates repetitive information and places topics in order of priority. It may take your leadership team or staff about 45 to 60 minutes to come to consensus about the problem of practice that surfaced in your data.
That's helpful, Jim, and I wonder what you think about my facilitating this step with the leadership team rather than with our whole staff. The team could then take our findings to the full staff for input and review before moving to Step 5 and crafting, revising our SMART goals and tasks. As you know, one of the leadership lessons I learned a long time ago is that people tend to support what they help to create. So I would really like to find a way to continue authentically engaging the whole staff in this work.
I think that makes sense, Sue, particularly given the investment of your staff in this process. Keeping them engaged will hopefully lead to increased commitment to the final SMART goals and tasks in your school's plan. Leadership teams should consider these 3 prompts when examining narratives in areas of congruence and discrepancy. The first question asks you to examine your findings to identify what is happening that should. For instance, if your school implemented a set of Tier 2 interventions that are having the intended impact on student outcomes, then you might want to identify specific practices around those interventions that you want to sustain. The second question asks you to consider what is not happening that should. For instance, is your core instructional program meeting the needs of 70 to 80% of your students? If not, then you might want to consider interventions that could be implemented in Tier 1 so that you're meeting that goal of 70 to 80% success for your students in the core. An understanding of the responses to the final question, what is happening that should not, will help your team identify practices to disrupt, dismantle, and replace with evidence-based practices.
You know, Jim, these questions will definitely focus the conversation with the team. You often remind me of how important it is to celebrate our good work with our school community, and responses to the first prompt will definitely help in that regard.
Once the team has responded to the questions on the previous slide, you're ready to facilitate the process of revising the school's problem of practice. The next few prompts are definitely interesting to think about, particularly in light of this year's goals and initiatives since they are related to providing interventions at all levels, Tier 1 or core instruction, Tier 2, and Tier 3. I used prompts on this slide with another school that I coach. That school also implemented interventions at all 3 levels and was interested in revising its problem of practice based on this year's SBA results and other data. I added an asterisk at the bottom of the slide, provides a link to a recording posted on the website that can support you and your team in completing this step.
Thanks, Jim, for sharing these prompts. It looks like the prompts could easily be revised to apply to different problems of practice that might surface at this step of the protocol. Additionally, I appreciate the resource on the website. I'll be sure to review that presentation before facilitating this step with our leadership team.
We're almost there. The final step in the data analysis protocol is crafting and or revising your school's SMART goals. I strongly recommend you and your team consider the 4 prompts listed on this slide in light of the problems of practice identified in Step 4. Do goals and tasks align? Are goals and tasks rooted in data? Importantly, do goals and tasks respond to the problem of practice? And are SMART goals actually SMART? Do they contain all the areas that a SMART goal should contain? I don't think we need to spend much time describing this step since your team is familiar with writing SMART goals. If needed, I also provided a link to another presentation on our website. This one focuses on crafting and revising SMART goals.
Thank you, Jim. I think your assessment about our team's skill level in crafting and revising our SMART goals is on target. Still, it's nice to know there's an additional resource we can use, particularly with our newer leadership team members. Thank you again for walking us through these steps of the data analysis protocol, particularly focusing on steps 3 and 4. This coaching session will support our leadership team, staff, and me to use the protocol to address equities and inequities in outcomes for our students and the practices impacting those outcomes. I really appreciated your sharing the resources on this slide. The leadership team and I found them helpful as we worked through the protocol.
This presentation modeled a coaching session between a veteran principal and leadership coach. We used actual school data and findings that emerged from leadership team and staff analysis of the data. We hope the coaching session assisted you in understanding steps 3 and 4 in the data analysis protocol, triangulating data to identify and prioritize areas of agreement and disagreement in your data, and clarifying and reviewing problems of practice in light of those findings.
Thank you for joining us for this presentation. Our contact information is listed on the slide. If you would like a copy of the PowerPoint or any documents referenced during this presentation, please contact our office. Thank you, Jim. It's great working with you as always.
Thanks, Sue. Well done.